and though they swung away from him as he pressed forward, yet by the time he had gone 3 yards they were all about him like a heavy cloak. Then Leothric stepped back and drew Sacnoth, and Sacnoth divided the ropes without a sound, and without a sound the severed pieces fell to the floor. Leothric went forward, slowly moving Sacnoth in front of him up and down as he went. When he was come into the middle of the chamber, suddenly, as he parted with Sacnoth a great hammock of strands, he saw a spider before him that was larger than a ram. And the spider looked at him with eyes that were little, but in which there was much sin, and said, "Who are you that spoil the labour of years, all done to the honour of Satan?" And Leothric answered, "I am Leothric, son of Lorendiac." And the spider said, "I will make a rope at once to hang you with." Then Leothric parted another bunch of strands, and came nearer to the spider as he sat making his rope. And the spider looked up from his work, said, "What is that sword which is able to sever my ropes?" And Leothric said, "It is Sacnoth." Thereat the black hair that hung over the face of the spider parted to left and right, and the spider frowned. Then the hair fell back into place, and hid everything except the sin of the little eyes, which went on gleaming lustfully in the dark. But before Leothric could reach him, he climbed away with his hands, going up by one of his ropes to a lofty rafter, and there sat growling. But clearing his way with Sacnoth, Leothric passed through the chamber, and came to the farther door. And the door being shut, and the handle far up out of his reach, he hewed his way through it with Sacnoth, in the same way as he had through the port resonant, the way of egress for war. And so Leothric came into a well lit chamber, where queens and princes were banqueting together, all at a great table, and thousands of candles were glowing all about, and their light shone in the wine that the princes drank, and on the huge gold candelabra, and the royal faces were irradiant with the glow, and the white tablecloth, and the silver plates, and the jewels in the hair of the queens, each jewel having a historian all to itself, who wrote no other chronicles all his days. Between the table and the door there stood 200 footmen in 2 rows of 100, facing one another. Nobody looked at Leothric as he entered through the hole in the door, but one of the princes asked a question of a footman, and the question was passed from mouth to mouth by all the 100 footmen, till it came to the last one nearest Leothric, and he said to Leothric, without looking at him, "What do you seek here?" And Leothric answered, "I seek to slay Gaznak." And footman to footman repeated all the way to the table, "He seeks to slay Gaznak." And another question came down the line of footmen, "What is your name?" And the line that stood opposite took his answer back. Then one of the princes said, "Take him away, where we shall not hear his screams." And footmen repeated it to footmen till it came to the last 2, and they advanced to seize Leothric. Then Leothric showed to them his sword, saying, "This is Sacnoth." And both of them said to the man nearest, "It is Sacnoth," then screamed and fled away. And 2 by 2, all up the double line, footman to footman, repeated, "It is Sacnoth," then screamed and fled, till the last 2 gave the message to the table, and all the rest had gone. Hurriedly then arose the queens and princes, and fled out of the chamber. And the goodly table, when they were all gone, looked small and disorderly and awry. And to Leothric, pondering in the desolate chamber by what door he should pass onwards, there came from far away the sounds of music, and he knew that it was the magical musicians playing to Gaznak while he slept. Then Leothric, walking toward the distant music, passed out by the door opposite to the one through which he had cloven his entrance, and so passed into a chamber vast as the other, in which were many women, weirdly beautiful. And they all asked him of his quest, and when they heard that it was to slay Gaznak, they all besought him to tarry among them, saying that Gaznak was immortal save for Sacnoth, and also that they had need of a knight to protect them from the wolves that rushed round and round the wainscot all the night, and sometimes broke in upon them through the mouldering oak. Perhaps Leothric had been tempted to tarry had they been human women, for theirs was a strange beauty. But he perceived that instead of eyes they had little flames that flickered in their sockets, and knew them to be the fevered dreams of Gaznak. Therefore he said, "I have business with Gaznak and with Sacnoth," and passed on through the chamber. And at the name of Sacnoth those women screamed, and the flames of their eyes sank low and dwindled to sparks. And Leothric left them, and hewing with Sacnoth passed through the farther door. Outside he felt the night air on his face, and found that he stood upon a narrow way between two abysses. To left and right of him, as far as he could see, the walls of the fortress ended in a profound precipice, though the roof still stretched above him. And before him lay the two abysses, full of stars, for they cut their way through the whole earth and revealed the under sky. And threading its course between them went the way, and it sloped upward, and its sides were sheer. And beyond the abysses, where the way led up to the farther chambers of the fortress, Leothric heard the musicians playing their magical tune. So he stepped on the way, which was scarcely a stride in width, and moved along it, holding Sacnoth naked. And to and fro beneath him, in each abyss, whirred the wings of vampires, passing up and down, all giving praise to Satan as they flew. Presently he perceived the dragon Thok lying upon the way, pretending to sleep, and his tail hung down into one of the abysses. And Leothric went toward him, and when he was quite close, Thok rushed at Leothric, and he smote deep with Sacnoth, and Thok tumbled into the abyss, screaming, and his limbs made a whirring in the darkness as he fell, and he fell till his screams sounded no louder than a whistle, and then he could be heard no more. Once or twice Leothric saw a star blink for an instant and reappear again, and this momentary eclipse of a few stars was all that remained in the world of the body of Thok. And Lunk, the brother of Thok, who had lain a little behind him, saw that this must be Sacnoth, and fled lumbering away. And all the while that he walked between the abysses, the mighty vault of the roof of the fortress still stretched over Leothric's head, all filled with gloom. Now, when the further side of the abyss came into view, Leothric saw a chamber that opened with innumerable arches upon the twin abysses, and the pillars of the arches went away into the distance and vanished in the gloom to left and right. Far down the dim precipice on which the pillars stood he could see windows, small and closely barred, and between the bars there showed at moments and disappeared again things that I shall not speak of. There was no light here except for the great southern stars that shone below the abysses, and here and there in the chamber, through the arches, lights that moved furtively without the sound of footfall. Then Leothric stepped from the way and entered the great chamber. Even to himself he seemed but a tiny dwarf as he walked under one of these colossal arches. The last faint light of evening flickered through a window painted in sombre colours, commemorating the achievements of Satan upon earth. High up in the wall the window stood, and the streaming lights of candles lower down moved stealthily away. Other light there was none, save for a faint blue glow from the steel eye of Tharagavverug, that peered restlessly about it from the hilt of Sacnoth. Heavily in the chamber hung the clammy odour of a large and deadly beast. Leothric moved forward slowly, with the blade of Sacnoth in front of him, feeling for a foe, and the eye in the hilt of it looking out behind. Nothing stirred. If anything lurked behind the pillars of the colonnade that held aloft the roof, it neither breathed nor moved. The music of the magical musicians sounded from very near. Suddenly the great doors on the far side of the chamber opened to left and right. For some moments Leothric saw nothing move, and waited, clutching Sacnoth. Then Wong Bongerok came toward him, breathing. This was the last and faithfulest guard of Gaznak, and came from slobbering just now his master's hand. More as a child than a dragon was Gaznak wont to treat him, giving him often in his fingers tender pieces of man, all smoking from his table. Long and low was Wong Bongerok, and subtle about the eyes, and he came breathing malice against Leothric out of his faithful breast, and behind him roared the armoury of his tail, as when sailors drag the cable of the